The call came just after sunrise, shattering the stillness of Emily Carter's small Boston apartment. She fumbled for her phone, her heart sinking before she even answered. The voice on the other end was cold and professional. "Miss Carter, I'm sorry to inform you. Your father passed away early this morning." For a moment, Emily just sat there, staring at the wall. The world blurred. She knew her father, Richard Carter, had been sick for months, battling a failing heart. But deep inside, she had always believed there would be more time, more visits, more conversations, one more hug. The next flight to Vermont couldn't come soon enough. Emily drove from the small regional airport in a rented car, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. The Carter family home, tucked away at the end of a long country road, loomed ahead, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Standing on the porch was Susan, her father's second wife. Susan didn't cry. She didn't hug Emily. She simply opened the door, her expression unreadable. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Emily made her way to the hospital bed they had set up in the living room during his final weeks. There he was, her father, lying still, his face calm, almost peaceful. Emily sank to her knees beside him, tears spilling freely. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here." The funeral was a small, somber affair. A handful of neighbors, some distant relatives. Emily delivered a shaky eulogy, her voice breaking when she said, "He always told me I was his greatest pride." But the real shock came 2 days later. The family attorney, Mr. Halpern, invited them to his downtown office to read Richard's will. Hope, surely her father, who had raised her single-handedly after her mother's death, would have left her the house, the land, maybe even the small savings account he had spoken of. The will was brief. Everything, the Carter estate, the investments, the land, had been left to Susan Carter and her daughter, Chloe. Not a penny for Emily. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned to Mr. Halpern, searching his lined face for some mistake, some forgotten addendum. "There must be an error," she said, her voice cracking. "I am sorry, Emily," he said gently. "Your father updated his will 6 weeks ago." Susan sat perfectly still, her manicured nails tapping lightly against the oak table. Chloe, her daughter from a previous marriage, smirked slightly. Emily felt the room tilt. Her father had adored her. He had promised, years ago, that the house would always be hers. She remembered sitting with him on the porch swing, his arm around her shoulders, as he said one day, "This will all be yours. You're my heart." Why would he change everything? Susan rose gracefully, smoothing her black designer dress. "Come, Chloe," she said sweetly. "Let's go home." Emily sat frozen in the attorney's office, staring at the paperwork, feeling the foundations of her world crumble. Grief twisted into something else, something colder, sharper. Something wasn't right. Deep down, Emily knew it, and she was going to find out the truth, no matter what it took. On the way back to the motel, Emily couldn't find a seat. She sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her thoughts were racing on the way back to the motel. How could it be that her father had left everything to Susan and Chloe instead of her? Scenes from her past flashed through her mind one by one. On the way back to the motel, Emily remembered well the day her father brought Susan into the house. She was very young then, barely 10 years old. Susan seemed beautiful, cold, and infinitely alien. Her smile was too strained, and her voice too sweet to be sincere. From the very beginning, there was an invisible wall between them. Susan treated Emily politely, but always with alienation. She never fought openly, but always made it clear Emily was not needed here. "Don't run around the house, Emily. You leave traces. You ruined the new tablecloth again. You're always causing trouble." My father did not always notice this subtle hostility. He worked hard to provide for his new family. And when he came home in the evenings, all he saw was the quiet and perfect atmosphere that Susan had so diligently maintained. And then Chloe appeared. A girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, always wearing elegant dresses, always with polite answers. She was a copy of Susan, just as charming on the outside and cold on the inside. Emily remembered one day when her father brought her a gift, a new bicycle. She had already imagined how they would go to the park together, how he would teach her to ride it, just like when she was little. But at the last minute, the bike was given to Chloe. Emily stood aside, clutching an old helmet. trying to hold back her tears. Over the years, the situation only got worse. Susan skillfully wove a lace of lies and manipulation around her. She made Emily feel like a burden, an unnecessary reminder of Richard's past life that Susan wanted to erase. But despite all this, Emily knew one thing: her father loved her. When they were alone, he would hug her and tell her how strong and smart she was. He promised that one day everything he had would belong to her. "You're my only real family, Em," he said, stroking her hair. "No matter what happens, remember that I'm always with you." So now, as she sat in a dark motel room that smelled of cheap soap and old carpet, she felt more than just loss. She felt betrayal. Nothing made sense. How could her father have signed everything over to Susan? Why did he change his will only 6 weeks before he died, when he was in a serious condition? The more Emily remembered, the more questions surfaced. Susan always planned everything. She never did anything without a plan. And if she got everything now, it means she had been working on it long before her father's death. The anger that had been lying dormant somewhere deep inside Emily's chest was now flaring up. She knew this was not just an injustice. It was a crime. And she would prove it. The very next morning, Emily felt her anger gradually turning into determination. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to find the truth. And she was ready to dig, even if she had to break all the rules. After a few calls and lunch with one of her father's old friends who worked at a local hospital, she managed to gain access to the archives. The records of Richard's last months in the hospital were complete and detailed, but Emily's main goal was to find something that could explain the change in the will. While reviewing documents and medical reports, she finally came across a video that rocked her world. It was part of a hospital camera recording made a few days before her father's death. Emily forced herself to watch it, even though her heart was racing. In the video, her father, weak and exhausted, was sitting at a table in a hospital room, with Susan standing in front of him. She spoke to him in a sweet, almost sympathetic tone, but with each word she became more and more aggressive. And here's the moment when she pulled out a document and handed it to Richard. "Say, it's not that complicated, Richard. You want everything to be okay, right? Just sign here. You want Chloe to have everything she's entitled to." Her father swallowed hard, his hands shaking, but he signed. Emily slapped her chest. How had she not seen this before? How could she not see that it was not a normal signature? She felt her blood boiling and her heart breaking with hatred. And then she realized Susan had not only forced her father to sign the will, but had probably influenced him when he was physically and emotionally weak. It wasn't just manipulation, it was fraud, and not just on Susan's part. Her actions could only be part of a much larger scheme. She had no right to let this go unanswered. Emily wiped the sweat from her brow and turned off the screen. Her mind was too overwhelmed by the new facts. But she already knew what to do next. She now had proof, a recording that showed Susan had used her father's weakness against him. The heroine was ready to act. She didn't just want justice. It was important for her to reveal the whole truth, even if it meant destroying the lives of those who betrayed her. The explosion of anger in her chest was getting stronger, and she knew it was only the beginning. That night Emily could not sleep. All these weeks, every moment of her life, seemed to be just a preparation for what she was about to do. The video she had found was only the first step. She couldn't stop. She was determined now. Revenge was no longer just a desire, it had become her life's work. In the morning, she went to the lawyer she had entrusted with her inheritance a few months ago. She had long ago realized that she would not be able to achieve justice without his help, and although her intentions seemed not entirely ethical at first, now only one thing was important to her: to get back what was rightfully hers. "Emily, this is going to be difficult," the lawyer said as he watched the video and documents. "This recording may be the decisive evidence, but we must not forget that the will was changed through a doctor. And that will also add to the problems. Susan is knowledgeable. She won't just sit and wait. I'm not going to just sit there. And that will also add to the problems. Susan is knowledgeable. She won't just sit and wait. I'm not going to just sit there." Emily replied, her voice hard and cold. "We're going to do everything we can. And if I have to, I'll go after her myself." The feeling that used to fill her heart when she thought of her father had now changed. She was no longer the defenseless girl who used to cry in the corner. When her bike was taken away, she was stronger, colder, and her heart now had only one goal: revenge. Emily spent the next few weeks preparing. She gathered information about Susan and Chloe, about their every move, about how they worked on their perfect facade. She started meeting with people who knew their secrets, people who were not afraid to tell the truth. But most importantly, she penetrated the very heart of their world. It immediately became clear that their ideal life was built on a lie. Susan, the cold, manipulative woman she had once feared, now looked weak, vulnerable, and sinful. And the moment Emily was finally able to face Susan alone, she felt her heart break with anger, but also with satisfaction. She was ready to release this anger into the world. And what she said to her was not just words. It was something much more. "Do you think you have succeeded in deceiving me? That your manipulations will go unnoticed? You took my future, but I will get it back. I promise." Susan only tried to smile, but a shadow of fear had already appeared in her eyes. She knew that everything she had built was now coming apart at the seams. In that moment, Emily felt her whole life come to a head. She was not just fighting for her inheritance, for money or property. She was fighting for her dignity, for her right to be part of this family, and she could not turn back. Step by step, her plan began to materialize. She went to court and filed a lawsuit. Using the video as her main evidence, she demonstrated that the change in the will was unlawful. Her trust in truth and justice grew stronger. She was not just fighting for what was hers, she was fighting for her self-respect, for her future freedom. And in the end, when Susan and Chloe were left without any arguments, when their perfect shell cracked, Emily was the one who came out on top again. But her victory was not easy. It brought pain and loss, because revenge has a price. But despite everything, she achieved her goal. And when she was just a few final steps away from the final denouement, Emily realized one thing: true revenge was not about restoring justice. It was about getting back what was stolen from her and coming out of it a stronger, more whole person.